At this point, it's really important to explain why you talk about this the way you do. In society, there are usually two opinions. Either you're for women, meaning you're a feminist, or you support a patriarchal system, and you're perfectly happy with that. But you have your own view, your own perspective, and it's worth unpacking that a bit, because you're actually one of the people who says that in the future, politics will be led by women.
Yes, because when a woman reaches her true level of authentic femininity, she'll act from a place of motherhood. The women we often see in politics today are frankly not what we'd hope for. They're either women who act like aggressive alpha males or women with no principles whatsoever. That's why the most important thing is that they operate from love first. And as I've said before, if we're talking about the future from a futurology perspective, the foundation of that future is the state of love. That will be the benchmark in every sphere. How much love does this woman carry? And how much of that love can sustain the political work she's about to take on? Business people often come to me for consultations and say, I want to build a corporation with this person, a 50-50 partnership. And I tell them, listen, this person doesn't have enough love inside them. So eventually there will be deception, betrayal, and conditions will be created that push your company downhill financially and strategically. And that's exactly how it always plays out, because the choice to move toward love or not always belongs to the individual. But that choice is influenced by how much love a person received from their mother at the very beginning, whether they were conceived in love, whether their parents loved each other, whether the mother and father were fulfilled as individuals, whether they lived in harmony without the fear of losing each other and without jealousy, aggression, rigidity, or competition.
But at the same time, you've said that almost on a genetic level, women carry a kind of blockage, something that prevents the matrix from fully spreading its wings, from expressing its soul and becoming harmonious. That there's something within women that blocks this harmonization of everything with everything.
Yes, and the reason is actually very simple: upbringing. Because most women are raised by unhappy mothers.
So this can be solved through upbringing?
Exactly. Women are raised by unhappy mothers who live in one of two extremes. Either the mother constantly adapts, tolerates everything, lives in fear, resentment, jealousy, judgment, hiding behind a mask of being nice and gentle. Or she goes to the other extreme. She comes out swinging and tears everything apart, fighting for her rights like a militant feminist, and the only thing left of her femininity is the outer shell. Those are just two extremes of the same woman.
That's one side of the story with women. But only about 100 years ago, leading European psychologists, famous and respected across Europe, were saying that a child is basically nothing, that a child is a half-human, that kissing a child was bad manners. People genuinely believed this and raised children that way. Today we talk about balance, discipline and warmth, firmness and love. But just a century ago, not that long ago, children weren't even supposed to be hugged or kissed. So women grew up in those conditions too.
We have to acknowledge that evolution is happening. Transformation is happening, and we need to keep up with the speed of these changes. If we rely on psychologists who were saying those things 100 years ago,
well, there's definitely a big shift happening now.
Yes, but that shift is mostly happening in more developed countries.
True.
And even there, it's maybe in about 10% of society. Everything else is still very inert. What people declare and what they actually do are often as different as night and day. Real love, the genuine understanding of it, exists only among a small number of people. Our task is to create conditions for it to grow. I've always said the foundation of everything is the family. It's sacred ground. And at the center of it must be love, harmony, and interaction. How can we build that today? By elevating the status of kindergarten teachers, school teachers, university professors, and medical professionals to the highest level in society. Those should be the most respected and highest paid positions in the country. If that's where we invest value and prestige, the best people will go into those professions. And from the very beginning of childhood, we'll have the best upbringing. In kindergartens, the best care and development. In schools, the best teaching. In universities, the strongest professors. And in medicine, the best healthcare possible. Right now, the reality is the opposite. Professional athletes, football players, boxers earn millions, vastly more than a preschool teacher or a school educator. The difference is enormous.
So how do we get there if the people in politics themselves grew up without enough love?
We have to promote the principle of family. Put the family first. Even in the Soviet Union, they used to say the family is the basic unit of society. And in many ways, they were right. The more harmony there is in a family, the more balanced the child becomes. Our consciousness is open when we're young, and we become shaped by the environment we grow up in, by people, nature, conditions, beauty, art, technology, culture. If all of that is arranged wisely and harmoniously, we raise a multidimensional human being. Maybe this example isn't perfect, but it makes the point very clearly. Imagine two puppies from the same litter, from the same mother. One grows up in a loving home, is trained and cared for. The other grows up in an environment where people yell, get angry, kick the dog around, never train it. Genetically, they're the same mother, same DNA, but you end up with two completely different animals. One becomes a danger to society, while the other becomes a loyal companion and helper.
Do animals have consciousness?
Consciousness exists even in a stone, a couch, a car. Any form of matter carries consciousness because consciousness is essentially a concentration of energy. Wherever there is matter, there is automatically some form of consciousness.
Then what's the fundamental difference between animals and us, humans?
If you really dig deep into it, humans are the ones who are true Earth natives. Everything else is essentially extraterrestrial. In other words, they're alien technologies. Yes, they have consciousness, but their consciousness is more connected to the civilizations they originated from.
Okay.
And to adapt here, they need to live in this environment for a while. Only then might they eventually reach the level where they can be born as a human. In other words, being born as a human is something you have to earn.
So in a way, a human is basically the native, fully adapted Earth creature?
A human is a personality. Unfortunately, right now, it's a personality that's extremely suppressed, and ironically, mostly suppressed by itself.
Is there any light at the end of the tunnel? Let's steer this conversation somewhere hopeful. You once said that in the near future, people will move toward self-sufficiency, that men and women will gain the option to stop depending so heavily on the surrounding matrix. Women will develop qualities traditionally associated with men, a connection to creative energies, and men will also become self-sufficient and be able to interact with the matrix directly through themselves. Is that right?
The transformation will unfold across many different areas, but one key thing I've mentioned before, and I'll say again, is that people who pass away now are practically being reborn the next day. The delay on the level of the noosphere is almost zero. It's basically leave, return, leave, return. In many cases, the next mother is already pregnant, and the soul already knows that's where it will appear. But there are also those who will never be born again, because we have to understand something. Many people here actually come from the same soul, but that soul is embodied in multiple physical bodies at once. Whether we like it or not, we'll have to come to terms with that. And during this transition, the population of Earth will decrease significantly. Even the Bible hinted at something like this, that the soul would leave, and when what's called the second coming of Christ happens, the soul would enter the body again, and they would become one. The new sphere of the dead would cease to exist. And I'll say this, everything is moving in that direction.
So it was written correctly after all?
The point is that the ways of the Lord are mysterious. That information was given long ago because it reflected the original plan for how Earth would develop. It was already planned that we would combine space, information technologies, and creativity coming from other civilizations with planet Earth, and eventually integrate all of that within a single human being. It wouldn't matter whether that human is male or female. Earlier you mentioned how before puberty we're essentially whole, like children who contain both halves. Then puberty happens and we lose our other half. The thymus gland degrades, hormonal changes shut down nearly half of our personality, and our connection to divine energies becomes blocked. We fall into a half state.
Right,
Men
but
become incomplete. Women become incomplete. And then we spend our lives searching for each other in order to reconnect our software, so to speak.
and to pull together the other fragmented parts of ourselves.
Exactly. Through the exchange of masculine and feminine energies, we gradually restore ourselves, but only within a pair. That's why God is described as two energies. In Eastern philosophy, you could call them yin and yang. When they combine, they create qi. Men and women together generate the divine. There is no God outside the interaction of masculine and feminine energy. Right now, we're moving through a transformation where, through interaction, men with women, we exchange certain qualities. Eventually, we'll become whole without requiring dramatic compensations. For example, in the past, if a man pursued intense development without enough interaction with women, he might shift his orientation. If a woman pursued development without enough interaction with men, she might also shift orientation or experience major physiological changes. That used to be a natural balancing process. Now things are changing. A man who fully realizes himself won't need to change orientation or compensate through health issues, fate, or psychological strain. He'll be self-sufficient. The same applies to women. A woman will be able to succeed socially, politically, artistically, without fearing that her views about relationships between men and women will suddenly collapse. This will allow each of us to make choices more freely, and it will multiply the creative potential when men and women interact. They'll come together not out of survival needs, but out of happiness and love. A conscious choice made by two self-sufficient individuals. A woman won't choose a man simply because he's wealthy and can provide for future children. She'll choose a kindred soul without being dependent on him. Right now, if we don't find our other half, we often feel incomplete, because men are more connected to external civilizations and bring creativity, while women are more connected to Earth and bring the materialization of that creativity. If conflict arises between those energies, nothing materializes, and both men and women suffer from it. A man's inner strength and calm are closely connected to the woman in his life, and all genuine realization flows through feminine energy. If that balance breaks down, compensations appear. Shifts in orientation, personal crises, wars, epidemics, environmental disasters. These are all forms of imbalance that emerge when masculine and feminine energies act without harmony.
What will actually change on the human level? Because there are theories, and we've talked about this before, that someday humans might become almost godlike and even single-gendered.
Anything is possible. Our task is to remain open to possibilities. If we go back to the energy field, the informational structure of existence, the concepts of man and woman don't really exist there. The division exists mainly here on Earth, partly as a management mechanism. In many ways, it was created almost specifically for Earth because our planet acts like a kind of cosmic file-sharing hub. To launch, test, and harmonize various technologies, and then allow other civilizations to use them, certain conditions had to be created here. One of those conditions was the division into male and female. But things are changing now. Speeds are increasing, civilizations are exchanging technologies more rapidly, and the strict division between men and women is becoming less necessary. Still, I think you and I will live a long time in a world where men and women continue to exist.
So that's a very distant future scenario.
Only when evolution reaches the point where children are born through the resonance of similar energies,
through the multiplication of resonant energies.
When energies resonate and create something greater than the two conscious individuals involved. In that case, a soul emerges that then forms a physical body and becomes something greater than the two people who brought it into existence. In fact, children should always be gods. Always. Even today, if a mother lives according to what astrology would call her sun, meaning she lives through realization, joy, self-sufficiency, genuine interest in life, and the father lives the same way. If they truly love each other for their similarity and resonance, then the child will inevitably be born as a kind of God, someone who changes the world and brings something new into it. Such a child has access to civilizations and energies that they will channel into this world. They will be far greater than those born in fear.
Maybe everything simply has its own timing. You once said that around the 2000s, godchildren began appearing. Today's children are more whole. They're almost arriving from the future. What happened with our parents, grandparents, and people 100 years ago is no longer as relevant. Everything will be rewritten because of the children who are arriving now. They resonate with us. They radiate this love, this sense of the absolute, and through them we're gradually changing. Even changing how we raise and interact with them.
Yes, children now influence us much more than they did before. In the past, we shaped them much more strongly.
They came mainly through family lineage programs.
Exactly. Back then, the process was mostly repetition.
Cycles.
We were moving in a spiral, so to speak.
Like samsara.
And we were born among ourselves. And we kept making the same mistakes over and over again because we weren't really learning.
But each time in a slightly different era.
Right. A new era. Slightly different conditions, slightly different technologies. Because for a long time, humanity's main role was simply to function as an energy transformer. We serve a function for planet Earth, and Earth serves a function for other civilizations. Other civilizations send their technologies here, and in return, they receive technologies from other civilizations. Earth becomes a kind of adaptation zone where everything gets tested and integrated. Even our human races are directly connected to specific civilizations beyond Earth.